And thanks to Arlene for that shocking report. And joining us now to discuss Starmer's visit to China is Steve Yates. He's a senior fellow of national security policy over at the Heritage Foundation. Steve, thanks for joining us. What's at stake here with Starmer's visit to China?
Well, a lot's at stake potentially, especially in some of the long-term issues that the UK has struggled with. First and foremost is the disposition of Hong Kong. It was one of the reasons why UK visits to China had fallen off in recent years. It was the demonstrations, the imposition of the national security law, the, I think, unconscionable detention and trial of Jimmy Lai, and the general quashing of the whole idea of one country, two systems that was at the heart of this deal. And so China backing away from probably the most famous international agreement between the UK and China was a serious blow. So he's looking to reheat these things. But as your package was alluding to, China hasn't exactly warmed up to a golden age. In Britain, there's this talk of it was a golden age of UK-Chinese relations, and they want to get back to that from this cold age or ice age. And I think that the Chinese treatment of the UK and the United States generally has been quite cold.
Yeah, as you point out, the situation with Hong Kong, perhaps the most egregious example of China just completely ignoring agreements that were made. And as Starmer goes there to create new agreements, what's to say that those agreements should get honored? But Starmer, as you point out, he's the first British head of state to go since 2018, mostly because of those Hong Kong relations souring. But as the package just alluded to before we spoke by Arlene, there are nearly finalized plans for this enormous Chinese embassy right in a sensitive location in central London with, this evidence of espionage. So is China just completely exerting their soft power over the UK? And can the UK do anything about it?
Well, in short, I think the sad answer is yes. And it's a particular pattern that we've seen elsewhere, including with the United States, where our leaders from time to time will get together and they will have joint statements, a rare communique, which is a fancy word for an agreement, and we'll have the veneer of cooperation. There'll be talk of the rules-based international order. This is the danger zone for Starmer, where he shouldn't repeat what the Canada Prime Minister had just said by talking more about a strategic partner in trying to uphold this rules-based international order. Anyone who has watched anything over the last 10 years would know that China's right in a central role at destroying what this rules-based international order supposedly has been. Lying and perpetuating COVID was disastrous for the World Health Organization. The cheating on trade and non-trade barriers was disastrous for the World Trade Organization. And of course, it's funneling money and material assistance to Russia for its war against Ukraine also is a dagger into NATO and this supposed rules-based international order. So I think he faces serious headwinds. He'll try to make some business transactions, talk about investments, but they have to be careful about that. Europe has learned by that experience that when you open up to China's tech manufacturing base, you can quickly hollow out further your already struggling economy. So it has to be careful. And talk about climate change won't balance out any of those scales.
Yeah, I'd like to dig a little deeper into your last point, Steve, because as Trump pointed out in Davos last week, national security and economic security are so tightly wound together. And we saw that with China as they became more isolated. It seemed like they were weakening a bit. And now we saw Carney go last week and strike all these new business deals, and now Starmer going as well. Carney denying that there's free trade agreement, but he's greenlighting these Chinese-made electric vehicles into Canada. Could we see something similar in the UK?
I'd be surprised if there weren't echoes of some of the similar game plan playing out. At the same time, he did have somewhat the benefit of seeing the sort of hot takes that were positive for Carney for a moment among mostly critics of President Trump. But at its core, what you just framed accurately about the relationship between economic and national security, President Trump has been clear about that. It's not an idea that's owned and occupied only by him. I think it's objective reality. It's what got out of alignment, especially in the last couple decades. And that adjustment and realignment, I think, has been embodied by the Pax Silica initiative that came out of the State Department, is signing up new partners every given day that are the true leaders about advancing technology and opportunity, but with human dignity at its core and a transparency and accountability written into the code of the pact that they make with one another. Those are standards that China can't measure up to by any reasonable standard. And that's fundamentally what has been wrong with the engagement approach all along. There's been this aspirational notion that if you get China into some kind of grouping, it will conform to the grouping. But what has happened over and over and over is it drags down the bilateral or multilateral group to its standards. And the UK really shouldn't fall for that again.
Yeah, I think what you do get is an influx of cheap goods, which is sort of like a short-term hit of false economic prosperity, but over years and decades, you see that hollowing out that you're describing. Is that the strategy for Carney and Starmer, is to try to inject some short-term economic relief, being that their economies are challenged, especially with Trump's stance with tariffs? And if so, where is the red line with Trump? Because Trump is sort of sitting on the sideline saying that he might retaliate.
Well, I think that these leaders slowly, some better than others, learn that, yeah, the tariffs have been uncomfortable, maybe disruptive in some of these relationships. And economists will duel forever about the pros and cons of it. What they have been is an effective negotiating tool to upset the way things have been done and try to reframe the conversation in a way that sets a new normal. That is the constructive way to try to respond and engage. And leaders are taking their turn about whether they're going to get out of the political cycle that really just talks about the president and their personal feelings about the president and talk really about, hey, maybe it is time to rethink what our economic relationship is with the United States and others, but in a way that promotes investment and jobs. And maybe we need to make a concession or adjustment here. After all of these countries have made huge concessions and adjustments that fed the concentration of manufacturing supply chains into China. The whole world treated China as if it was a developing economy, all the way to the point where people now call it the second largest economy. And power is being exercised in the reverse direction now. So we have to throw off the delusions. And hopefully we'll see the UK, Canada, and others somewhat sober up and maybe pursue the path that the Prime Minister of Japan is, by finding the positive that you can engage with and build upon. You don't have to be negative towards China. I might be, but they don't have to be. They can accentuate the positive, and if China rises to those standards, then they come in. That has to be what comes first. You don't let them in and then hope that they reach the standards and kind of protect your economic base. They will only ever protect their economic interest.
We'll be looking very closely at what the UK does, the results of what Canada did last week, and potentially the EU to follow. Steve Yates, thank you so much for your analysis this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.